Good morning and welcome to Coffee and the Word. It's Monday and it's time for us to be encouraged to take on the week. I hope you joined a church yesterday and was fed and filled, and I hope you fed and filled some people as well. The scripture tells us to stir one another up for love and good works, and I hope that's what you did. Which brings me to today's topic, and if you have the Bible app, YouVersion, then you know what today's verse is, but we'll cover that in just a second. When I was but a wee lad, I remember my mom, I lived in the PR days. I don't know if you know what the PR days are, but really it was PRC. It was pre-remote control. Our TV had a dial on it, and you used to have to walk up to the TV. I know, this is craziness. You used to have to walk up to the TV and turn the dial. And so my mom and my dad weren't dial changers. That was not their position in the family. Their position in the family was, provider and, all the caretaker and all that stuff. But the PRC was whatever child was in the house. And so we lived in, where I remember it the most, we lived in a 2-story house one time, and we'd be in our room and we'd hear, "Dale!" And I'd run down because, being the good child that I was, and I would say, "Yes, ma'am, I am here to serve you." And it's not true. If my mom watches this, she'll be like, "That is not how that went down." But anyway, I would come down and she'd tell me to turn the channel. And I'd turn the channel and I'd go back upstairs, and, I could not wait. I couldn't wait till I got promoted. And I knew what it took to be promoted. I had to become a dad. You see, because as a dad, you get to tell people what to do. You no longer have to serve. They serve you. At least that's how I saw it. And so once I had children, I couldn't wait. I nursed them. I cared for them. I changed some diapers. And I was working to get them mobile. And as soon as they became mobile, I got a TV with a remote control. So I had to come up with a whole new task, so they were now my water fetchers. And so I remember thinking as a kid, it's really weird what we think about as a kid. We think that the day is coming when somebody will serve me. And if you become a parent, you quickly realize that the parental duty is pretty much full-time service of your child, right? You are constantly serving your children. And so today's verse fits perfectly into this, because Jesus came to this earth, the scripture tells us, not to be served, but to serve. But I want to give you some context. So in Matthew chapter 20 and verse 25, here's what happens. Jesus called his disciples together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them." Now, real quick, before I go any further into this text, I want you to realize something. We live in a society that works best when our leaders operate under a term called servant leadership. In other words, their leadership style is to serve those below them, to provide them with all of the necessary tools and support needed so that those people can accomplish the goal set before them. And so there's this cycle of service that happens. We don't currently live in that right now. We live in almost a monarchy type system, and I'm not talking political. I'm just saying we live where the people at the top tend to just bark orders to the people below, and it becomes very problematic, because a successful business, in my opinion, is one that serves its employees. And the higher ranks are servant leaders of the lower ranks all the way down the chain. And you want to see a successful business, find a business that is set up like that. You want to see a successful country, find a business set up like that. It's funny that our politicians are called public servants, but it feels more like they're lords oftentimes. They make policies without considering how it serves us. And again, I know I said I wasn't political, but I'm talking about both parties, so I'm not picking a side. I just want us to realize that that's not really how Jesus came about this whole process. And so he tells them, he says, the Gentiles, their system of leadership is to lord it over them. In other words, force you to do what needs to be done. Not so, listen to what he says, not so with you. And by the way, the you was his 12 disciples, but his you is also us. Instead, Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. And he goes on to say, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for many. You know, when this verse popped up this morning, I was like, well, I've talked a lot about service. And I'm like, well, maybe this is because God is like, y'all still aren't doing it. Like, the whole idea here is you ought to be serving one another instead of treating it as though you're a purchaser of some commodity. You're supposed to be actively involved in serving your community, actively involved in serving your church, actively involved in serving your family. And if you want to see a successful anything, you see that the top is serving those below them. And so I want to encourage you all today as you walk into your businesses, if you're a supervisor or if you're the lowest man on the totem pole, today what I want you to do is I want you to determine that you're going to serve not so that you can gain some sort of financial benefit, but because you serve a God who serves you. And you realize that's the way we need to go about it. But if you're, whatever position you hold, today I'd like you to act in service of those around you. And don't lord your power over them, whether it be your children or your employees or your friends. And so just as Jesus came not to be served, but to serve and give his life a ransom for many, he calls us to do the same. He calls us to be servants in a world full of people trying to get out of servitude. Isn't that interesting? In the upside down economy of Christ, he calls us to do the very thing we're trying to get promoted out of. But really, what we should be doing is trying to get promoted into. If it was Jesus' way, it ought to be ours. Anyway, that's today's message. I hope you have a great Monday. I hope that your week this is one of those weeks when you determine you're going to grow your faith. You're going to build on your previous week's journeys, and you're going to find ways to serve one another in love, because that's what we're told to do. God bless you. I hope you have a great rest of your week. This has been another edition of Coffee and the Word.